Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sports Live with Steve and Justin. Today, of course, we have Justin, we have the rabbi here, and today we are lucky, blessed, and astounded to have Tom Wilson with us today. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Rabbi's going to do a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, Tom, thank you for joining us. As I may have talked about it a few times on the show, I'm on the board of the American Basketball Hall of Fame, and we are having a ceremony on August 13th at the beautiful new practice facility, University of Oakland up in Michigan. And I am truly honored to have a chance to talk to one of our inductees this year. Tom Wilson has been involved in sports and entertainment for over 40 years. He was. I'm hoping I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable on this topic. You did a lot of amazing things. He was president and CEO of the Pistons for a very long time. From '78 to 2020, he was involved in all sorts of things. This is the person who built the palace at Auburn Hills. He's had more titles than Ernest Hemingway, and he is truly. Yeah, I want to use that one thing too. But he is joining us today to talk about everything throughout his career. It's a remarkable career that involves acting, running different sports organizations that have won 9 championships. He was there for the Bad Boys, built that up from a 16-win team, and then rebuilt it again for the '04 for one of the great, sort of what's considered the great sports upsets of all time, although it was a 4-1 win over the Lakers. So I, did feel like that in retrospect, but anyway, we are truly honored to have 2026 Hall of Fame inductee Tom Wilson with us today. I'm at 32 years old. You take over to the Detroit Pistons and you're at Cobo Arena, which was, it was nice, but it's not anything like the Palace. And then at the Silver Dome, which really wasn't built for basketball. And you're coming in, it's a 16-win team. How did you get things moving in the direction of really getting a buzz about Detroit? Because when you were there, they, at the beginning, they just weren't particularly on the radar for people. How do you get people involved?
That team didn't exist. I mean, it really didn't. It'd been so bad for so long and never captured the emotions of the city at all. And now you move into a football stadium that holds 40,000 people in your half of the stadium that you're playing in. And why buy a ticket? I don't need to buy a ticket in advance. I mean, there's going to be plenty of seats anyways. And our first year, we averaged really 3,000 to 4,000 warm bodies. And that's with the Lakers coming in and the Celtics coming in and them actually drawing some people. So that was our biggest task, is how do we get somebody interested? And the team was so bad. And so the real key was the one draft. We drafted Isaiah Thomas and Kelly Tripucka. We had 2 first-round picks. And Kelly was sort of pre-sold as a Notre Dame kid. His father was a quarterback and everything like that in the NFL. And Isaiah was going to show you something every night that you hadn't seen before. So now, after 2 or 3 years of us young kids kind of figuring out the business, we were sort of ready. And so now, how do we get people in? So now we went from 3,000 or 4,000 to 8,000 or 9,000, which was pretty good. But we said, we really need to send a message. So we started doing some crazy things. And first off, we went to like Marathon Gasoline, and we sold them 20,000 upper level tickets for $20,000, buck a piece. Give out 4.
Great story.
All we care about is getting bodies in the building. And they would give them out, and suddenly we'd have 15, 16, 17,000, which was unheard of in the NBA at the time. And what we wanted was when you got a newspaper, you remember newspapers, and if you were sitting there reading it on Sunday or Saturday morning and it said 17,000 people for the Silverdome, you got to look. Well, what's going on out there? And so we were trying to build curiosity. We were trying to expose to another 10 or 15,000 people how much fun basketball can be. And then suddenly it started catching on. So when we did something called Punk Night that you and I talked about, the Milwaukee Bucks, who were sort of the best team in our division. Marcus Johnson referred to us as a bunch of punks. So we got Keller Tafuka to dress up as a guy from Greece with the cigarettes rolled up in the t-shirt and the greaser hairdo and everything like that. And we did a thing, wear a leather jacket and get in for a buck. And we had like 30,000 people come out that night, and they had a great time. We won the game. And suddenly the city started to fall in love with us. We were making headlines, and we became a pretty interesting curiosity for folks. And from that point on, it just took off, and it sort of had a life of its own because we had a product finally that we were able to sell.
And the product itself was remarkable. I mean, I think what is sort of visionary in how you were looking at it was you were seeing the game as whether the team was going to win or lose. The fans are going to have an experience. I think up until that point, a lot of people just sort of thought, like it's about winning and losing, and that's a component of it. But really seeing the experience as being something meaningful. That is really, I think, what changed with the Palace.
I think we brought a lot of showbiz into it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you look at it now, and everybody's got a dance team, and everybody's got a DJ, and everybody's got this, and everybody's got dancers, and they've got the old lady dancers, and they've got this and that. We started a lot of those things just to give you something to talk about, and we had one of the first video boards. I'm going way back now, but we were showing people some things in a great building that they had never seen before. Once we moved to the Palace, because having played everything in a football stadium, which is like playing in an airplane hangar, there was no see or anything like that. So we move into not only a building, the best building, and suddenly it became the thing to do here in Detroit. And we sold out, I don't know, 250 games in a row or something like that. It was the place to be. Really became the place to be.
Well, I can I just interrupt for 1 second? So talking about the Palace, so I'm a labor attorney by trade. I've negotiated project labor agreements in New York City for building trades unions for a long time. And to hear you talk, which I have, talk about what you did and using companies that were either in Detroit or in surrounding Michigan to do the work, and then make sure that they all had apprentice training programs where they're training people and building trades and building workers and skilling them all in the process of this project. So you're not only building something for the company, but you're helping the community at large, and hopefully building loyalty to the team so people come and watch.
Well, we did that twice. We did it for the Palace, and then when I went downtown after Bill Davis and the Villages brought me downtown, we were building Little Caesars Arena, and we had 1,000 interns, if you will. And when you're an intern, a lot of times it's just, hey, get me the hammer, kid, kind of thing. But that's okay. That's how it starts. And we have a real shortage of trades here in Detroit. We have a real shortage of trades everywhere in the country. And part of our job is to expose people to this, expose them to the fact this is a real job, and you can make $60, $80, $100, $120,000 doing this job without going to college, and serving a purpose and taking that back home where you can now raise a family, have a good quality of life. It can happen. And we've exposed our kids and we've beaten it into them. You have to have a college education. It helps, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to commit 4 years, 6 years, 8 years to college. You can have a good life, and we need those people.
Absolutely. I've been involved in a lot of apprentice training programs and schools where we spent, and you basically we ended up in New York City. You have a lottery, and you have people showing up, and these are people that want to learn these trades and go out there in the business world. And it gives an opportunity for the employer to maybe get some people and reduce their cost. So, because you don't have a highly skilled person doing a menial job, so it becomes a balance for the project too. So I commend you on doing that. Not everyone that runs a project thinks of it like that, like you did, but I think your methodology seems to be, listen, the idea is to get everybody to come to the stadium and watch the team, right? But you look at the community as a whole and think how we can make that better and in turn promote ourselves. And I think that's commendable because it's brilliant. All right. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work. That's what apprentice training programs are supposed to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Rabbi, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No. Go ahead. As fascinated as I am by the business stuff, I gotta ask the basketball questions. Just because you were there, you started there after Dick Vitale, actually, and there were you and Jack McCloskey, Trader Jack McCloskey came in, 16-win team, and built something that was absolutely remarkable. I mean, I look at some of the trades that you all pulled off. Rick Mahorn for Dan Roundtree, like Lambier for Moeski and Rob. Yeah, like I'm like looking at this and I'm like, I mean, I know that he made a high volume of trades. I mean, that was something he was known for. How is that in your position from the business angle? Dealing with a roster that's going to have a lot of changes in it.
Because of where we were, which is in the pits, there were no bad trades. You have some that didn't work as well as you would have liked, but it was something to talk about. And I remember the Lambier thing very well because he was with Cleveland and we're playing them, and I'm just sitting in the stands watching, and he's lined up for a free throw next to Terry Tyler, who might have been the nicest guy in the world. And there's the guy who's getting ready to shoot the free throw, and Lambier just takes his elbow and crushes him right in the. What are you doing? I mean, this is crazy. The next day I went into Jack and I said, I think this is a guy that you hate unless he's with you. I think this is a guy you gotta think about. And he says, I've actually been thinking about him. He's only averaging like 5, 6, 7 points a game. He's not like he's a star or anything like that, but he's got a toughness to him that we don't have. And it was probably 2 months later, 5 minutes before the trade deadline, that it went through and we were able to bring Bill in. And that was a real key thing because toughness, the bad boys, it's hard to be tough when your toughest guy is 6'1", and 180 pounds, which was Isaiah,
Right.
who hate anybody and was the most competitive guy I've ever known. But you needed somebody up front that was going to think the same way. And then Lambier, which begat Rick Mahorn, suddenly gave you the bad boys. And then, they sort of let it filter down. Everybody that came into that team from that point on went to dinner with Isaiah and Lambier, and they said, however you played before, that's not going to work anymore. We don't play soft here. We don't get hurt here. I mean, if you look at how many of our folks spent time on the injured list or anything like that, I mean, unless you broke something, you were playing. If you were sitting on the training table, you took a lot of grief from your own team, because our job is to get out here and play. And they played hard, and there were many games. And of course, every championship team has an aura about them, but there were so many games that I used to sit and look at, and I'd say, this game's over. We haven't even thrown the ball up yet. But you just look at the other team, and they're looking at you kind of going like, well, not today. We just need to get through this, and then we'll play somebody else tomorrow. Maybe we can win. But you'd win 30 games a year before you ever played. You were just in their heads.
Totally. Well, and Lambier is such an interesting player because he's kind of a unicorn. I mean, he's known as a tough guy, he hadn't really developed a lot at Notre Dame. He went over to Italy and played. Nobody seemed to find a way to maximize what he was. And he was not only a great, strong player, could knock people around. He was a finesse player in a lot of ways, which, is the last thing you'd think of. But he was like an 84% free throw shooter. He could step out and hit shots. Mm-hmm. So seeing that component in his game, was that something that was apparent to you all? Or, I mean, is that something that you saw develop as he was with the organization?
I think it developed as he grew more confident in who he was, and funny thing, when he was in school, he was a wealthy kid, came from a lot of money, country club kid and stuff like that, and played hard, but he never established that persona. And I think from my own perspective, it's like a switch. Somebody threw a switch in his head, because Bill was Bill played as long as he did, as hard as he did, and as well as he did, because of his mind and his mindset. And And that wasn't there, I don't think, when we picked him up. But when he did, and once he started having some success and he sort of realized, this kind of works for me. This sort of tough guy, this sort of intimidator, this sort of, guy that gets under everybody's skin and irritates everybody. I kind of like this. I like being a villain. He loved being a villain. Who does that? I mean, not many people, but he welcomed when people would boo him, he'd like kind of wave it on and stuff like that. Like, give me more, give me more. And he would take all the grief for the team, and he would do that for his teammates, and they loved him for that.
That's incredible. Well, and I look at the scouting, some of the guys you all found. I mean, Dennis Rodman out of Southeast Oklahoma. Again, Dumars was a first round pick, but he's McNeese State. Like these were, Rodman's a second rounder. Your scouting department seemed to be able to see things in players that nobody else could really find, and how that worked together. How did you all go about sort of designing the roster when you're thinking about bringing players like that together?
Well, you had a guy named Will Robinson, who Will was the first African-American coach in major college basketball and stuff like that. Coach Doug Collins, actually, in college. And Will was a Detroit guy, and Coach Spencer Haywood in high school, Ralph Simpson in high school also. But he would find guys like Dumars at McNeese State. And I remember you talked to Will, and he'd go out and scout somebody. And he'd say, well, so-and-so's a player. Well, what about this guy? He scored 38 points. He can't play. What do you mean he can't play? He scored 38. I'm telling you, he can't play. When Magic was coming out, is he a point guard? Is he a small forward? Is he a power forward? He just plays winner, is what he uses.
Yeah.
He just plays winner. And you know what? He just played winner. But a guy like Rodman we saw play in the first, remember they used to play 3 games like in Hawaii and other places, stuff like that at the end as sort of an audition for the league. And he played really well. And McCloskey fell in love with the guy. Then he goes to Hawaii and he's just not that good. Then he goes to, wherever the third place was, maybe Portland, and he really wasn't that good. So McCloskey he's getting worse. So McCloskey sends that Mike Abdenauer, the trainer, down, says, find out what's wrong with this kid. And it turns out his asthma was so bad that the real Dennis Rodman was the first guy you saw, not the second guy or the third guy. And so Jack said, I'm going to take this guy. And so our first preseason game, we drafted John Sally, Dennis Rodman. Neither of them could make a shot. And we stink up the place. Billy Cunningham from the Sixers comes over and says, you don't realize that you have just taken a huge leap with those 2 guys. And he was 100% right on a night where they scored probably 6 points combined. But he could see that we were going to be an athletic, defensive, much more capable team with those 2 on the floor.
And it all really gelled. I mean, you guys were coming off a and one of the things that has always fascinated me is you're coming off a championship where really, the phantom call on Lambeer against the Lakers, you're up 3-2 series, and it's brutal, right? And you come back next season, start off like 16-4, 16-3, but something just didn't feel right with the team. And then, I mean, when McCloskey walked into your office and said, I want to do Aguirre for Adrian Dantley. I mean, that turned out to be one of the most brilliant midseason moves ever, if not the. What was that? I mean, what was that like for you? I mean, there was a lot of risk there. I mean, you're trading a superstar player for a guy who, in Dallas, he had a reputation. He flipped Coach McCloyd off at one point. I mean, he had a reputation as being not a great team guy. And I know he knew Isaiah coming up and everything like that, but how did you all get first off, like, what was it like making that move? Because of, I mean, the incredible risk involved, and second of all, like, how did it make the team different? Because it really did seem to take you to the next level.
I think the biggest issue that the players had was, and I love watching Dantley play. I mean, he was maybe the most efficient player I've ever seen play. I mean, he would get 10 shots and 28 points, somehow, because he would go to the line all the time. He did 85% of his free throws. People couldn't stop him, although he looked very stoppable at 6'5". But you couldn't. He was just a magician around the basket. But every time you threw him the ball, the players felt it ain't coming back. And so from a chemistry standpoint, it's kind of like, well, throw it to him and I might as well head back on defense because I'm never going to see it again. And that was creating its own set of problems. On the other hand, you're winning. And why are we in the business? To win. And we should the championship last year. Why would we change? And why would we take a chance on Mark? And you touched on it. Isaiah was such, well, it's probably Isaiah's best friend. And it goes back to those meetings that we had, we being Lambier and Isaiah and Mark, to say, Mark, this ain't your team. You know, Dallas was your team. This ain't your team. This is our team. And now you're one of us. So it's now your team too. But we play a certain way. And we're not selfish. And we don't care who scores. And if you get excited about scoring 30 points a game, it's not going to work here. So, you know, you got to decide right now that you're going to play Piston basketball. And everybody heard the same speech and everybody bought in, which is not always the case in any sport.
Well, you look back, I mean, I think Dantley was the leading scorer in the team the year before. And like the idea of being, within one bad call of being a champion, and then mid-season moving a guy who was the leading scorer. I mean, like that is, one of the most, really incredible risks I think a team has ever taken, but it was ingenious. It's really the piece that y'all needed.
Takes vision.
Yeah, totally. That season, so you get to the championship series and get through the gauntlet that is the East, and you got the Lakers on the ropes. When did you start to feel like this is really going to happen?
Oh, probably. We won the first two, and you sometimes forget as you go over it and pat yourself on the back that Magic pulled a hamstring in game one, came out, tried to play in game two and really struggled. So when you won game two, you kind of felt like, we're going to be okay. We just got to get one in LA. If we get one in LA, we're going to come home, we're going to win this. And we ended up getting two, but we just took control of it. I think this was such a tough team that if we got you down, we just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. And that was sort of the key. So I think in game three, you could finally breathe a sigh of relief and say, I think this is going to work out okay. And it's hard when you've never won before. All you think about is the bad stuff. It's a funny thing. And like this year, watching the series with the Knicks and the Spurs, and Spurs would be up 30 or something like that. And then the Knicks would come back and win. And everybody's going, what a great comeback for the Knicks. I always look at it from the Spurs point of view, like they got to be crushed.
Yes.
Chuck Daly used to have a great line about coaching. He said, the problem with coaching is losing is the worst thing in the world and winning is only a relief. And I thought that, that kind of he said, if you're losing, you're down. If you're winning by 15 points, you're already worried about the next game. There's no joy in winning. It's just we got it. Now I got to worry about the next game. And so that's what it's like. You sort of have a sort of this negative thing that hangs over you all the time. Oh, what if, as opposed to we're gonna take this thing. So hopefully that doesn't drift down to the players. You want them a little more optimistic.
Well, it's funny because you see interviews with people who've won it all, and they're already talking about, well, I don't know how we're going to do this next year. I mean, we're going to lose this guy, we're going to gain this guy. It's going to be different, and winning is a never-ending journey. It really isn't.
When you talk about, I always remember Pat Riley talking about it with, trying to keep the Lakers afloat, and then finally the wheels came off. But he used to talk about the disease of me, which was always, I thought, a great phrase, because when you win once and when you win twice, now I know I did that. Well, he thinks he did that. I did that. And this guy thinks he did that. I did that. The coach did it. I did that. Everybody thinks it was them. And you lose perspective of the fact that it was all of us. It was all of us together.
Right.
And
well, that's
so
what Riley. I used to work for a company. They hired Riley to come in and speak to us, and that is something I remember for him speaking. I also remember what it takes for commitment. He was a big commitment guy on how you make it happen. It's every second of every day of everything, 120%. You keep plowing forward, and it never ends. And it's another thing that never ends. and physically for basketball players, it must be hard sometimes. You have injuries, like you said, and 5 of the team come and say, or 4 others of the team come in and say, "What are you doing?" But you can work through that. You can play that, and sometimes that's maybe not be in the best interest of the team because you're only going to make it worse. But you feel it in your heart that I got to be out there. I got to be doing my thing, and obviously it worked out for you a couple of times at least.
Yeah, we got very fortunate.
So it's amazing time. I remember it well. And where you want to keep talking, Rabbi, or you want me to ask him about his
I was just going to say, I mean, talking about, to me, the first title was incredible, but the back-to-back part was really remarkable.
Absolutely.
In that the East was, you're fighting off Jordan and the Bulls who are building up. The Knicks were fantastic. Atlanta had Moses Malone, Theus. I mean, Celtics were still looming. Like you had all those teams, and then you get to the finals and you win the first game against Portland and then lose a heartbreaker. And I remember, I think it was you guys had lost like 17 in a row in Portland. So you're going back to Portland and it looks like the series is going the wrong way and it just changed. What happened there?
I think it was winning the first one because I remember Lambier or somebody took a video of him on the floor and he's asking the ball boy, says, "How many have we lost in a row? What's a streak?" And the kid says 17 in a row. He said, "Well, the streak is over," and he took great pride in that. And the second game, I think, which would have been game 4. I just remember how passionate our fans were and how nice the Portland fans were. And at the end of the game, I think Danny Young or somebody like that made a shot just after the buzzer. And I remember Earl Strom was a ref, and Earl said, "I'm not allowed to use the video, but if I've got any questions, I'm going to use the video anyway." Well, anyway, they waved it off, and I remember the Portland fan behind me going, "Oh well, oh well."
Wow, that's different. Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't have happened in New York like that.
No.
But and then the last game, Vinny Johnson hits a shot with 007 on the clock, to win the last game. So it was close. I mean, you put some distance between you and you say, well, they won 3 in a row out in Portland. I mean, every one of those games was, hanging by a thread with a minute to go. But you found a way to win. And that was a willpower thing. I think it was very important to the guys. Like they won 1. They really wanted to win 2 so that people in the future would look back on them and say it wasn't a fluke. 1 was a fluke. 2's not a fluke. And could have been 3, definitely not a fluke. And then, after that, I think you run into the problem. You could see Jordan coming. I mean, you just knew that you're on borrowed time because if this guy ever laps you, you're never going to come back. You're never going to pass him. And we played, I think the next year we played in I think it was a January or February game. And Isaiah didn't even play it. It was a game in the Palace. And they beat us by like 1 point. We missed a shot at the buzzer. We blew an inbound pass is what it was. I still remember, so it must have been pretty consequential. We blew an inbounds pass with 5 seconds to go. Well, they celebrate like they won the championship. And you know what? I think they did. That night, they won the championship because they got over that mental block we were talking about. They knew they could beat us. And once they knew they could beat us, they continued to beat us from that point on.
Sure. Well, and then again, the Pistons were great for years, started to fall off. And then I think one of the more remarkable parts about the franchise is all of a sudden you rebuild to the '04 team, which is, again, you're getting guys like Ben Wallace out of Virginia Union. You're putting together this team totally rooted in defense, and you walk in to the championship. I mean, obviously, you fought your way through. I think it was like a 53-win season. So I think you were like the 3rd seed at that point. So you fought your way through some great teams to get there. And you're looking across the court. You got Shaquille O'Neal. You got, Kobe Bryant. You got, Carl Fisher. You got a team on paper that was supposed to be a mismatch. And it was I looking at the score totals, game 3 in particular, you held this team to 66 points. I mean, like what, and ended up winning the series 4-1 and completely controlled the game defensively. How did you build to how did the organization sort of regroup and build to that sort of team?
Well, the big influence or emphasis, I should say, was on defense. From the get go, and again, everybody buys in. I mean, you wouldn't look at Richard Hamilton at 170 pounds as being a defensive guy, but he bought into it. And Ben Wallace, of course, just set the tone. And so everybody that they added, our final piece was Rasheed Wallace, and Rasheed got labeled as a troublemaker, a problem guy. Rasheed is a very bright basketball mind, really, really good, and defensively excellent. And one of the first 6'11" guys that could really shoot threes and do that sort of thing. But I remember going into that series, I didn't give us a chance. And when we won game 1, I thought, hey, great, it's going 5 games. I mean, that's all I thought. Now we're going to get beat the next 4, but we got one. We got one.
Yeah.
And then, after, I think I was telling you this story before, that after game 2, we end up losing game 2. We were up 3 with like 7 seconds to go. And Kobe, of course, hits a 3 to put in overtime. We lose, and I'm crushed. And I think we got no chance now. And we could have gone up 2-zip and going home and everything like that. And I'm in the loading dock, and I couldn't have been in a worse mood and everything. And Magic came up and said, "You guys are going to be okay. Our guys are fighting. You guys are playing like a team. You're going to win this series." Well, it's nice of him, but he was 100% right. I mean, this team was more united even than our 89-90 teams. I mean, these guys loved each other. Larry Brown was the perfect coach for them, just always talking about, you got to play the right way, just play the right way. And they all did. They all bought into the system. And you see that with almost every championship team. There's very few outliers on that team. Everybody, even if you don't believe it, you better buy into it. Otherwise, you're not going to fit in, not going to enjoy the journey.
And it was this close to being back to back. I mean, you took a great Spurs team to 7 games, 81-74 game. I mean, one of the great defensive battles in the history of the game. What was it? I mean, was that the sort of moment where did you feel like you were going to win that Spurs series going in, or how was it different than the Lakers series, I guess?
It was tough in the sense that, they had, Tim Duncan, and Tony Parker was always a problem for us. And Ginobili was a problem for us. And, we're playing game 5. It's 2-2. We're up 3 with 7 seconds to go or something like that. They're inbounding the ball, and Ginobili gets trapped down on the 3-point line in the corner on the baseline. And one of our guys rotates over to him and leaves Robert Horry. And, you're sitting there in the stands going, no, of all the people, don't leave him.
Good shot, Bob. Yep.
And sure enough, they throw it to him. He ties the game with a 3 with no time left, and we lose in overtime. Then we came back and won game 6. And you just thought, how do we win 2 in a row in San Antonio? But that game, I think we're up in the third quarter by a point or 2 or 3. But I never felt comfortable with it. I just, Duncan was a lot to deal with, and those guys were good. They were very, very good. It was a tough, bitter pill, though.
Well, going back to the year before, 2004, I mean, you were involved in really what is one of the more remarkable stretches in sports, where you were actually in 2004 involved with 4 teams that won titles, at a professional level, which I don't know if there's anyone else who did that, you got the Pistons, you got the WNBA team, you got the Arena team in Tampa, and then the Tampa Lightning. What about your culture there made that possible?
And, it was interesting because, we had won the Pistons had a pretty good run, and the Palace was doing well. We had amphitheaters that were number 1 in the world, and for 19 years in a row or something like that. I mean, the culture was great. Is it transferable? Can you take? And so we bought the Tampa team, and they were by far the worst team in hockey. They had like one legitimate player, Benny Lecavalier, who was 19 years old. And that's the only thing that they had. And so the first thing I did was I traded for a general manager. He'd never been a general manager before, but I gave up a draft pick for a guy named Rick Dudley, who used to be in the league. And he was the general manager I'd hired for the Vipers, which was an IHL minor league team. And I just loved Rick, his passion for the game and his work ethic and everything like that, and his knowledge. And we won. We had over 100 points every year he was associated with us, even in the minor leagues. So I took a flyer. I would have gotten run out of town for hiring a guy like that, except nobody cared about that. So I really, you could kind of get away with it in Tampa at the time. And Rick came in, and I mean, literally in 5 years, we went from just the worst to winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, that doesn't happen. But he picks up a guy like Marty St. Louis on waivers for $230,000, and Marty becomes the MVP of the league. Javi Bulin sits out a year in a contract dispute. We trade for him, sign him, and you win the cup. I'll tell you one story about the flukiness of it all, because it wasn't a remarkable year. We won the NBA, the WNBA, the Stanley Cup, and arena football, as you said. But we're not doing well. We're having a good year, but they're upset with Javi Bulin. He's not playing as well as he should. We're going to start John Graham. John Graham's our backup goalie, so we're going to play him in Washington. So we hop on the plane. John Graham gets caught in traffic, so he does a flight. Tortorella just take off. So we fly up to Washington. Your punishment is you're not playing. Javi Bulin plays. Well, he wins, and he's playing again tomorrow. Again, and he's playing again tomorrow. And we go off and we run off, like 14 out of 16 or something with Javi Bulin playing. And we go on from there to win the cup. So you're that close to making a consequential change through some fluke. You don't do it, and somehow you end up winning. And I think every team probably has 1, 2, or 3 of those stories in their magic year of something that just sort of happened that they didn't plan for or count on. And it ends up, it's either kismet or serendipity. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Totally.
I think that's life, though. I think relationships are like that. When you meet somebody, you never know. You shouldn't have been there. I think life, I think business is like that. I think everything's like that. You don't know why these things come together, but they seem to do. And when you look back at it, it looks impossible. And I think that's a great example. And I like how animated you got about ice hockey compared to basketball.
Oh, well, it's
because it's an amazing story. I mean, when you go from absolutely the bottom to the top, and I remember those years. I'm a Ranger fan from way back when, but I used to have season tickets many moons ago. But it really is. Hockey's a different animal. I mean, when you're dealing with those players, I mean, it's not like they learn something and that's what's getting it through. They eat, drink, sleep, bleed hockey. Those hockey players, first of all, their physical ability to be able to do that on a night after night is amazing, fast, hard. And, if you ever been, like you said, only in Tampa Bay could you do something like that. If you were in Montreal and did something like that, you'd be... you'd be killed. So
out on a rail, yeah.
So it's really it's a different sport, and I was amazed when there was a franchise in Florida. I was like amazed. I mean, it's not because that's not the tradition, but
when we got down there, the thing you had to do, you had to count on the visiting crowd. So when we would play Philadelphia, it would be a sea of Philadelphia jerseys. Same with the Rangers, same with the Bruins, and so on and so forth. In fact, if you're walking in the concourse, you'd hear this big cheer. You didn't know who scored, in Tampa. But as we got better and better and better, the weirdest thing happened. People would come in wearing their Bruins jersey. Tampa would go up 2-1. People would take off the Bruins jersey and have a Tampa jersey underneath it. I mean, that was how I'm going to grudging transition to being a Tampa fan. I'm not full-hearted, but I'm gonna wear both jerseys for a while. So it was a great story. Ultimately.
That is amazing. Well,
amazing. And again, another amazing story
to have built 2 teams back from the bottom of the league to the top. I mean, that really is something. I've been dying to ask you what I think is like the most asked question. If people talk about basketball all the time, I have to go back to basketball. I'm obsessed.
Well,
But
you gotta. We can't keep them all day, and I know I'm looking at the clock, so you gotta.
I just want to ask him one more. Okay, and this is the argument everybody always has.
I know,
Great
I know,
player of
I
all
know.
time.
I don't want to hold him past his time. He's being polite, and we're
Okay.
so. But ask him the question. Ask him the question.
Okay,
I'm curious what he says. I think he's going to
great.
sidestep it, but let's see.
You always hear people, greatest player of all time, LeBron, Jordan. Your opinion, who was the greatest player you ever saw?
I think I would still go with Michael. I would still go with Michael. And finally, I just watched the Air movie again, which is the story of him signing with Nike and everything like that, Arrow and everything. I just watched it like 2 days ago, and I got excited again. And he's not even in the movie. But you're watching highlights of him and watching him do stuff. And we mentioned before Isaiah showing you something you'd never seen before every night. I mean, Michael did. And Michael, I'm always intrigued by the guys like Michael, like Larry Bird, like Isaiah, the guys who, when there's 12 seconds left on the clock, everybody in the arena knows who's taking the last shot. And it's going to be one of those three guys. And there's always somebody like that. And to have I always say it's not the willingness to make a shot, it's the willingness to miss a shot. That makes those guys great, is that if I miss it, I'm going to make it tomorrow. But I want to do it. I remember Isaiah used to talk about Bird, and he said, Larry Bird could come out at down 8 with 15 seconds to go. And if you looked in his eyes, there was no doubt they were going to win. Now, they might not, but there was no doubt in his eyes. And guys like that, and Michael was one of them, guys like that are just special. And I'm sure they exist today.
I don't see them like that, because I think out of some players in this league, the heart has drifted away and the talent may have taken over. But when I think about Bird, I think about, the stories of him coming out and say, you see that spot right there? That's the spot I'm going to take the winning shot right there. So if you want to stop, you got to stop me. I'll be right there. And then he goes, last seconds, boom, hits the shot. And he goes, told you. And Rabbi and I talk about this all the time. He may not have invented trash talk, but he certainly perfected it. He was a beast.
Yes.
And you think of him like guys like that. And when I think of the greatest, you think about people back in the day, and I'm older than the rabbi, but some really great players. You think of Magic, you think of all these people who played, and you wonder, it's really almost impossible to say who the best is, but then you see Michael Jordan, and the game is transcended, right? What he does is beyond, and his motivation and heart is beyond anything you've ever seen before. I mean, he takes players like Rodman, for instance, a person you actually know, and gets them and like, this is what you're doing. Don't do stupid stuff. I need you to do this, and I need 120%. And you see Rodman just shaking his head. Okay.
Oh yeah. He was. Everybody will tell you the most competitive guy they've ever been around, and he had to win at everything. Whether it was golf or anything else, and he would bet an unbelievable amount of money to make sure that he won. And I remember he used to play with Craig Hodges after every practice. When Craig was the best 3-point shooter, they would not leave practice until Michael beat him. And Hodges was competitive too, but that's how Michael became a good 3-point shooter fighter. By shooting against this guy. And they would do it every day. And the bus would be sitting out there with 10 guys because Craig Hodges was pretty good, at least the shooting threes. So anyway, well, it's been a joy talking to you guys.
Pleasure's all ours. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Well, looking forward to seeing you next weekend at the Hall of Fame ceremony.
Enjoy it.
Thank you, guys.
Well deserved. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Take care.
All good?
Yeah,
perfect. I'll remove you.
Tom, you're wonderful. Thanks for being great with your time and everything. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we'll do it again if you want to. Okay.
Anytime. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I know.